All spaces have a sound. It's what Barry Blesser and Linda Ruth Salter in their book Spaces Speak, Are You Listening? Call oral architecture. It's how you know when, say, you're moving house and you perhaps head back to clean up the old place. And when you go inside, you can hear that you don't live there anymore. The walls are bare. There's no furniture or books or plants or rugs or clutter that would allow you to hear the space as home. Even a small space like the one inside that bass flute has a sound. In fact, the sound of that small space is exploited by the instrument's designers to make it musical. The space inside that cello has a sound, and of course, this goods lift has a sound. So when we listen to anything, what we're hearing is the sound source itself and the space the sound is being made in. So today you've heard Bethany Lee playing an excerpt from Sacred Cauldron for bass flute by Catherine McMichael, and you've heard the sound of the goods lift. Sound is waves of air pressure that the ear detects travelling at many different speeds at the same time. Low frequencies are travelling slower than high frequencies. The sound waves that take the shortest possible route from the sound source to your ear are called direct signals. Sounds that bounce off one surface on the way to your ear, so on the ceiling or off the floor or off the shoulder of the person in front of you, we call those early reflections. And sounds that have bounced off more than one space before they get to you, we call that reverberation, or the reverb tail. The combination of these waves, the direct sound, the early reflections, and the reverberation, make up the sound of the space, and it's determined by three things: the size, its shape, and the materials it's made of. So put simply, large spaces reverberate longer than small ones. Uneven room shapes and surfaces create a more diffuse sound, and soft, porous, rough materials will absorb sound energy, while hard, smooth, shiny surfaces will reflect a lot more sound energy. Think of the sound of a small, cozy room, living room, versus a large, empty foyer. This goods lift sounds bigger than it actually is, and it sounds like a small church, with a total reverberation time of almost 3 seconds. Because even though it's relatively small, the surfaces are so hard and reflective, and the walls and ceiling are extremely regularly arranged, so sound waves can bounce back and forth very, very easily. You all being in here has also affected the sound of the space with your sound absorbent clothing and your skin and your hair and your bodies made up of 60% water. Overall, though, it's not dissimilar to the sound of the kind of space that Bach would have been using when he was writing his solo cello suites. We have Nicola Heinrich with us this evening to play an excerpt from the Prelude to Bach's Cello Suite No. 1 in G major, and it will be interesting to see how the sound of this metallic reflective box suits Bach's music. Of course, you wouldn't normally be this close to the sound source in a small church, but we've heard a lot more of the direct sound here in the goods lift than we would in a larger room. But the way the sound is reverberated around the space is reminiscent of this kind of sacred space, allowing the harmonies to ring on through each arpeggio and blurring into the next. David Byrne, in his excellent book How Music Works, outlines very clearly and elegantly the theory that all music grows out of the spaces in which they're intended to be performed, from Bach cello suites to Mahler symphonies to jazz and funk and punk rock. So it follows that a type of space that generates a certain kind of music won't necessarily be suited to hosting another. We can observe the same phenomenon in non-Western musics as well, and to demonstrate this, we might have a listen now to some contrasting music. Music which grew out of outdoor performance where loud percussive sounds can ring out clearly without interference from too many reflective surfaces. American composer Steve Reich studied various non-Western music and performance practices, including West African drumming. And from there he drew inspiration to write densely polyrhythmic music based on shifting, repeating patterns. So that was Hope Feltz King and Clare Wright performing a short excerpt from one of Reich's simplest pieces called Clapping Music. And you can hear that it doesn't suit the space nearly so well as the Bach. The early reflections and the reverberation conflict with the direct signal. You can still hear the music and its patterns, but it actually requires a lot more of your attention to try to understand those patterns. Simply put, the sound of the room is getting in the way. Even as I'm speaking to you now, it costs your brain a lot of extra energy to separate out what I'm saying, the words and the ideas, from the room sound. The American Speech Language Hearing Association notes that the reverberation time in a classroom should not exceed 0.4 seconds over a wide range of frequencies. Many schools in the UK have classrooms with a reverberation time as high as 1.2 seconds. As I mentioned before, this lift has a reverberation time of nearly 3 seconds, so it's far from an ideal space in which to try to learn anything. Students trying to learn in suboptimal acoustic spaces are shown to be more disengaged and have lower academic outcomes across the board. Now, I'm trying very hard tonight to slow down and enunciate very clearly to compensate, so it's difficult for me as well. You've been decoding the sounds of acoustic space since you were in the womb, correlating heard experience with visual, emotional, and social cues to develop your understanding of the world. And so your reaction to an acoustic space will be informed by your previous experiences in similar spaces. Does this goods lift sound like a bedroom? Do you think you could sleep here? No, everyone knows instinctively, no, I probably couldn't. The kind of sound that we associate with a contemporary modern sleeping space is quiet, restful, no reflections, all the sound is absorbed by soft furnishings and things. It makes us feel comfortable. Auditory spatial awareness includes as well the emotional and behavioural experiences of space. Listeners react both to cultural sources and to spatial acoustics because each is an oral stimulus with social, cultural, and personal meaning. This shouldn't surprise us. Hearing is a physical sensory faculty initiated when sound strikes the eardrum, and we can't turn it off. Unlike vision, where we can simply close our eyes, hearing is a 24-hour-a-day, 360-degree environmental awareness that can alert us to threats and opportunities, and can bring us back to consciousness from sleep, hence the alarm clock. As Marshall McLuhan noted, there are no boundaries to sound. We hear from all directions at once. The ear hears, but the brain listens. Listening occurs when the brain organizes, analyzes, and interprets the information that it receives from the ear. The brain can, of course, be influenced by other information as well. So visual cues, expectations, preconceptions. So to try to short circuit any cues that your eyes or expectations might give you, I'd like you to close your eyes now and listen as closely and attentively as you can. And imagine where the sounds you hear next might suggest that you are as we create a three-dimensional soundscape for you. Where did you imagine you were?
In a cave by the sea.
In a cave by the sea. That's what we were going for. Anyone else? Anything different?
Inside the seashell.
Inside a seashell. Ah, fantastic. Yeah, great. Anyone else?
Dungeon.
A dungeon. Okay, so there's a lot of projection involved with me. I'm a researcher by creative practice at the university, which essentially means that I investigate ideas by making things, specifically in my case, music or structured sound. So to finish off with, I've written a little piece specifically to be played by these fantastic musicians who've come down to illustrate some of these points for you here this evening. A piece that takes its starting points, the oral architecture of this space, the goods lift at the John Hansard Gallery here in Southampton, and incorporating as well some of the musical ideas that we've explored in tonight's talk.
Thanks for coming.